All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're dissecting a historical tragedy that absolutely did not just explode out of nowhere. It was meticulously engineered, step by agonizing step. You know, when we look back at the Holocaust, the sheer scale of the atrocity can feel entirely incomprehensible. It's just so easy to view it as a sudden, chaotic explosion of madness. But when we actually analyze the historical evidence, a much more terrifying reality emerges. The Holocaust didn't start with mass camps. It started with words, bureaucratic laws, and the systematic social exclusion of a minority group. So today, we're going to unpack exactly how a civilized society was transformed into a genocidal state.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll be tracing this dark journey through 5 key stages: the engine of hate, a cold legal weapon, escalation to mass violence, historical perspectives, and finally, the legacy of vigilance.
Let's start with Section 1, the engine of hate. Engineering ancient prejudice. To truly grasp this event, and to make sure we never reduce this tragedy to just some passive historical footnote, we first have to look closely at the ideological engine that drove the whole thing. The big question is, how does a society actually normalize atrocity? Well, history shows us that atrocities almost always begin with words. By exploiting the devastating economic ruin of the Great Depression and the deep national humiliation following World War I, Nazi propaganda strategically scapegoated Jewish citizens. They completely weaponized state-controlled newspapers, radio broadcasts, and even everyday school curricula to convince ordinary Germans that all of their nation's struggles were somehow the fault of a single population.
And this brings us to a really fundamental definition: anti-Semitism, which is prejudice, discrimination, or hatred directed towards Jewish people. Now, it's crucial to understand that this prejudice had already existed for centuries across Europe, usually as religious persecution or economic scapegoating. So the Nazi Party didn't invent it, but when they seized power in 1933, they aggressively re-engineered it into a radical, pseudoscientific racial ideology.
Notice the stark shift that happened here. We go from an ancient cultural prejudice to a completely fabricated biological myth. The Nazis essentially viewed human history as this brutal biological struggle. They placed their fictional Aryan race at the absolute top of a made-up hierarchy and then categorized Jewish people not as a religious group, but as a dangerous subhuman racial threat that was meant to contaminate the German nation. Propaganda relentlessly pushed this myth everywhere, literally trying to convince ordinary citizens that their very survival depended on purging their own neighbors.
Moving on to Section 2, a cold legal weapon, the architecture of isolation. For the first couple of years of Nazi rule, persecution was mostly localized, violent street thuggery. But that very quickly shifted into a highly organized, state-sanctioned legal architecture. The 1935 Nuremberg Laws revealed just how chillingly precise the bureaucracy was. There were 2 main components. First, the Reich Citizenship Law completely stripped German Jews of their citizenship, officially demoting them to mere subjects of the state with 0 political rights. And then, the law for the protection of German blood and German honor actually criminalized marriage and intimate relationships between Jewish people and non-Jewish Germans. It was entirely designed to legally enforce their obsession with racial purity. They isolated Jewish citizens based purely on genealogy rather than religious practice, essentially making them legal outcasts in their own homeland.
And it definitely didn't stop with just those major laws. Once those boundaries were drawn, the regime tightened the noose with hundreds of micro-decrees. Just think about these specific examples for a second. Passports were forcibly stamped with a massive red J. Jewish doctors were banned from treating non-Jewish patients, and public signs literally reading "Jews not wanted here" were plastered across parks and theaters. By looking at these everyday impacts, imagine a Jewish child suddenly being told they're excluded from their local neighborhood school. We can really see how this step-by-step process systematically conditioned an entire society to accept total exclusion.
Which brings us to Section 3, escalation to mass violence, from laws to camps. Once the legal boundaries were firmly established, and more importantly, accepted by the public, the state was ready to institutionalize physical violence. We can really map this out as a terrifying 4-step descent. Step 1 was the ideological scapegoating we just talked about. Step 2 was the legal exclusion through the Nuremberg Laws. That laid the direct groundwork for Step 3, harsh physical confinement, in places like the Warsaw Ghetto, where massive numbers of people were forced into incredibly overcrowded conditions with barely any access to food or medicine. And finally, Step 4 leads to the ultimate atrocity, the final solution. When you map this out chronologically, you clearly see the systematic tightening of that noose. We start in 1933 with Hitler becoming chancellor, moving to 1935 with the bureaucratic Nuremberg Laws, and then it all boils over in 1938 with the massive violence of Kristallnacht. Ultimately, as we'll discuss in a bit, this incredibly dark era culminated in a dramatic shift in global human rights law a full decade later in 1948.
By 1938, the visceral horror of Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass, purposely stands in stark contrast to the earlier, quiet paperwork of the Nuremberg Laws. Instigated by Nazi officials, mobs completely destroyed over 7,000 Jewish-owned businesses and torched hundreds of synagogues. In the immediate aftermath, 30,000 Jewish men were arrested and sent directly to concentration camps. This event marks the devastating, highly coordinated shift from legal persecution right into state-sponsored mass violence.
And this horrific escalation concluded with the final solution. The Nazi plan aimed at the systematic destruction and mass murder of Europe's Jewish population. Millions of Jewish people were transported from occupied countries straight to extermination camps. It was, quite literally, an industrial apparatus of death, where families were torn apart the moment they arrived and mass murder was systematically executed. Let's shift to Section 4. Understanding historical perspectives. The human element. To deeply comprehend this history, we have to look way past the macro-level state policies and try to understand the vastly different human roles played out on the ground. You have the Jewish victims, who endured unimaginable loss of their rights, their homes, their communities, and their families. You have the Nazi perpetrators, who actively promoted these beliefs and weaponized propaganda. Then there are the bystanders, ordinary citizens who witnessed all of this happening, maybe living right down the street from a ghetto or camp, but who just didn't intervene, whether out of sheer fear, indifference, or feeling powerless. And finally, the rescuers and resistance, incredibly brave individuals who risked their own lives, facing severe penalties to hide their Jewish neighbors and help them escape.
To process all of this, historians practice something called historical empathy. Using primary evidence, like, say, reading a diary written by a Jewish teenager during the Holocaust, doesn't mean simply agreeing with the actions of historical figures. Rather, it successfully grounds these massive, honestly incomprehensible statistics into very real, relatable human experiences. It allows us to truly understand the fears, the daily challenges, and the shattered hopes of the actual individuals facing this systematic hatred. Finally, Section 5, the legacy of vigilance, the aftermath and our responsibility.
We have to confront the profound aftermath of these atrocities. We really must pause and solemnly reflect on this devastating number, 6 million. 6 million Jewish lives were systematically lost in the Holocaust. And alongside them, millions of Roma people, individuals with disabilities, political opponents, and other targeted groups were also murdered. To even begin to understand the immense weight of this tragedy, we have to just let that number sink in. It represents millions of futures completely extinguished by an ideology of hate.
The legacy of the Holocaust had profound consequences for the entire world. The absolute shock of these atrocities directly spurred global nations to act, which led the United Nations to adopt the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. This document was designed to formally promote dignity, equality, and freedom for all people everywhere. The goal was to ensure that basic human dignity was finally enshrined in global law, so that a tragedy of this scale could never, ever be legally sanctioned again.
Studying this history really demands that we look closely at the underlying mechanisms of hate. So as we close out this explainer, I want to leave you with this final vital thought. Protecting human rights requires constant vigilance long before prejudice manifests as physical violence. A highly educated democracy was transformed into a genocidal state simply because ordinary people let the bureaucratic seeds of exclusion take root. So I have to ask you, how can we fulfill our active duty to recognize and stand against the early, subtle signs of discrimination in our own modern world?